John Andrews was a rancher who had seen many deals come and go, but this one was different. It was a story that started with a farm up for sale for just $1, a price so low that it seemed almost too good to be true. The farm was in the middle of nowhere, out in the dry and dusty stretches of the American West. John had heard the rumors, the whispers about the farm being cursed, but those were the kinds of stories that always seemed to follow the land out here. The locals avoided talking about the place. They'd always look away when John asked. People in town said the farm was haunted, that something bad had happened there long ago. But John wasn't one to believe in ghost stories. He had lived through his fair share of hard times, and he wasn't afraid of a little superstition. In fact, the idea that the place was cursed only made him more determined to see it for himself. John arrived at the farm early one morning, ready to start his new venture. The land was in bad shape. There were weeds everywhere, some nearly as tall as a man, and the house that sat in the center of the property was barely standing. It looked as though it had been abandoned for years, maybe longer. The windows were cracked, the roof sagging, and the front door was hanging off its hinges. But John saw potential. He saw the rolling fields, the quietness of the place, and a chance to build something from nothing. The people in the town had told him that the last owner had vanished without a trace. Some said he had gone crazy and run off. Others claimed he had been taken by something out in the desert. Whatever the reason, no one had been willing to touch the place for years. But John wasn't scared. He wasn't someone who ran from a challenge. He paid the $1, signed the paperwork, and took ownership of the farm. He started working right away, clearing the overgrown weeds, fixing the fences, and trying to make the place livable again. But there was something about the air here, something different. It wasn't just the dust or the quiet. It was a heaviness, like the land itself was waiting, watching. John tried to shake the feeling off, telling himself it was all in his head. But the more time he spent there, the more he couldn't ignore the feeling that he wasn't alone. One evening, while John was working late to repair a section of the fence, he noticed something strange. There were 5 young women standing by the edge of the field watching him. They were dressed in simple, worn clothes, and their faces were serious, almost fierce. John had never seen them before. They weren't from the nearby town. He would have remembered if he had seen them. At first, he thought they might be from a nearby farm, but something in the way they stood there made him think otherwise. They weren't curious or welcoming like someone coming to visit. They were watching him, sizing him up as if they were trying to figure him out. One of them stepped forward. Her dark eyes locked onto his, and in a calm but firm voice she spoke. "You're not going away from us," she said. John froze, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to being confronted like this. His first thought was that they must be locals, trying to get him to leave because they didn't like his presence here. But their words weren't angry. They were something else, something deeper, like they were speaking from a place of history. He took a step closer, trying to make sense of the situation. "I don't know what you mean," he said. "I've just bought this land. I'm fixing it up, making it better." The girl who had spoken didn't move. She stood still, her face hard, her posture unyielding. The other 4 girls stayed behind her, equally quiet, their eyes never leaving John. He tried to read their faces to see if they were angry or afraid. But there was no fear in their eyes, just a sense of purpose, as though they had a right to be there and he did not. "You don't belong here," the girl said, her voice still calm but with an edge of finality. "This land is ours." John blinked in confusion. "Yours? I've got the papers." "This is my land now." The girl shook her head slowly, almost sorrowfully. "Not yours," she said. "This land belongs to us and to our people. It always has." John wasn't sure what to make of her words. He had heard stories about the Apache tribe, of course. He had heard about their history, their struggles, and the battles they had fought. But this was the first time he had ever encountered anyone who seemed to speak with such authority about the land he had just bought. He tried to explain again. "Look, I didn't come here to take anything from you. I just want to rebuild the farm. I'm not here to cause trouble." But the girl didn't seem to care about his explanation. Instead, she took a few steps closer, her eyes narrowing as she spoke again. "You're not welcome here," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "This land is sacred to us. We are its protectors." John didn't know how to respond. He wasn't sure if they were just angry about the sale or if there was something more to their words. He had come here to make a life for himself, not to fight with anyone, especially not with a group of young women who seemed to be connected to the land in some way that he couldn't understand. But there was no denying the intensity of their gaze, the strength in their words. It wasn't just a disagreement, it felt like a challenge, something much deeper. John wasn't sure if he was ready for whatever was about to unfold, but one thing was clear. His purchase of the farm wasn't going to be as simple as he had hoped. The land, it seemed, had a history, and those 5 girls weren't going to let him forget it. As the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows over the farm, John stood there feeling the weight of their words pressing down on him. He had thought he was the one in control, the one who could turn this land into something better. But now he realized he was just another part of its long history, and somehow it seemed that the land had already chosen its protectors. The Apache girls weren't just defending the land, they were guarding something far more valuable. As the days passed, John couldn't shake the encounter with the 5 Apache girls. Their words echoed in his mind long after they had left. He had always believed that hard work and determination could overcome any obstacle. But these girls weren't just obstacles. They were part of something much bigger, something John didn't fully understand. He spent the next few days working on the farm, trying to make progress, but every time he worked late, he would see them again, standing by the edge of the field, watching him. They never said a word, just stood there like silent sentinels. It wasn't until the 5th day that John decided to confront them again, hoping that a conversation would clear the air and allow him to continue with his work. He walked toward the spot where they usually appeared. This time he didn't wait for them to come to him. As he approached the edge of the field, the 5 girls were already there, waiting. The air between them seemed thick with unspoken words. John took a deep breath and stepped forward, trying his best to sound calm and reasonable. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he began. "I've worked hard to buy this land. I want to fix it up and make it something good, something that could benefit everyone. I'm not taking anything from you." The girl who had spoken first, the one with the dark eyes, stepped forward, her gaze as unwavering as ever. "You think this land can be fixed?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with a deep sadness. "You think that just because you own it, you can change what it is? This land holds memories that go back long before your time." John was quiet for a moment, trying to understand what she meant. "I don't understand," he said. "I know the history of this place is difficult, but I thought people had moved on. I thought it was just land. I didn't realize there was something more to it." The girl didn't answer right away. She seemed to be weighing his words carefully, and for the first time, John saw something like pity in her eyes. "It's more than land," she said softly. "This is where our people lived. Our ancestors. They fought for this land and they died for it. They gave everything, and you think you can come here and make it something new?" John felt a pang of guilt. He hadn't thought of it that way. He had been so focused on what he wanted to build, on creating something for himself, that he hadn't considered the legacy of the land. "I didn't mean to disrespect your ancestors," he said, his voice sincere. "I just want to make a life here. I don't want to destroy anything." The girl's eyes softened, but her tone remained firm. "You don't understand yet," she said. "This land isn't just dirt and rock. It's a living thing. It remembers, and we remember with it." John didn't know how to respond. He had always seen the land as something to be worked and tamed, a place to build a future. But now, standing here in front of these girls, he began to feel the weight of their words. This wasn't just any land. It was a land with a story, a land with a history that he couldn't just erase with his plans and his dreams. "Then what do you want me to do?" he asked, feeling a sense of helplessness creeping in. "If this land means so much to you, what can I do to make things right?" For the first time, the girl smiled, though it was a small, sad smile. "It's not about making things right," she said. "It's about understanding. You need to understand what this land really is. And only then will you know what you should do." John looked at the other girls. They hadn't spoken yet, but he could see the same quiet strength in their eyes. They weren't angry anymore. They weren't demanding he leave. They were waiting for him to listen, to hear what they were trying to tell him. "What do you want me to do?" he asked again, more gently this time. The girl with the dark eyes nodded. "Come with us," she said. "We will show you what you don't see. We will show you the stories of this land, of our people." John hesitated. The idea of following them, of stepping deeper into the history of the land, was daunting. He didn't know what they were going to show him. But a part of him, the part that had always been willing to learn, was curious. He knew he had to understand if he was going to make this place his home. "All right," he said finally. "I'll go with you." The girl nodded, and without another word she turned and started walking. The other girls followed her, and John fell into step behind them, unsure of what he was about to discover but determined to see it through. They led him to a part of the land he hadn't yet explored. It was a small grove of trees hidden behind a ridge that John hadn't noticed before. The air was cooler here, and the sounds of the wind and the birds filled the silence. It was peaceful, almost sacred. As they walked, the girls began to speak, telling him stories of their ancestors, stories of battles fought, of lives lost, and of the deep connection their people had to the land. They spoke of the earth as if it were a living entity, something that could feel, that could remember. John listened intently, his mind racing with thoughts. He had never heard stories like these before. He had always heard about the history of the West in terms of conquest and survival, of cowboys and settlers. But this was different. These were stories of a people who had lived on this land for centuries, stories of resilience and survival in the face of overwhelming odds. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the land, the girl with the dark eyes stopped in front of a large rock, its surface covered in symbols and markings that John couldn't understand.
"This," she said, her voice reverent, "is where our people prayed.
Where they made their vows to the land, to the spirits who watch over us." John stood quietly, feeling the weight of the moment. He didn't know what to say. The connection the girls had to this place was undeniable. He could feel it in the air, in the stillness around him. This wasn't just a farm to them. It was a part of who they were. The girl turned to him, her eyes filled with the quiet understanding. "Now you know," she said softly. "Now you understand." John didn't have the words to respond. He had come here with his own plans, his own vision of what the land could be. But now, standing in this sacred space, he saw it differently. The farm wasn't just a place for him to build something new. It was a place to honor the past, to respect the land and the people who had come before him. "I understand," he said finally, his voice quiet but sincere. "I'll respect this land. I promise." The girl smiled again, this time with a hint of pride in her eyes. "You'll learn," she said, "and in time you'll see what we see." As John stood there, surrounded by the girls and the land they had shown him, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. This land had a story to tell, and he was finally ready to listen.